Okay, so what we're going to talk about now, hit swap displays here, there we go, is successes in attention. So we talked last time about when attention fails and why it's really bad and why we are kind of terrible at it. Now we're going to cover when attention is really good. So endogenous and exogenous attention, which if you remember from the last video, we ended with automatic and controlled attention. So those are tied to endo and exo attention. And then some components and some object-based attention. So endogenous attention, let's say you're looking for a friend and you're at a party and there are a lot of people, but you know that their favorite color is orange, just like me. And so you might start to look for something distinctive about them, like their orange shoes or they're wearing a green dress in this example. And so that is an example of endogenous attention. Okay, so it's internal, it's controlled attention, and it originates from within you. So it's a top-down process, it's controlled by your goals. Sometimes, though, someone might call your name. So your friend's actually behind you and then shout your name and then your head turns really quick. Okay, that's exogenous attention, where it's driven from a bottom-up fashion because it's something that's important to you. Exo meaning outside, coming in. So things like your name, the word fire, curse words, really loud sounds will capture your attention, that sort of thing. Color can be exogenous, but more it's like sounds, movement, and your name. So here's an example of an experiment that Posner did, and I have some more slides here in a second, but what's going on in this slide is that you have these valid cues here at the top. So this cue says, look over here, look over here. And then the target pops up in the same place you've been looking. Okay, and that is the rightmost point in these graphs where valid cues are very fast. Okay, that's exogenous attention. Look at this cue, yay, you found it. So it's really quick. Okay. Then sometimes you get, look over here, in the middle invalid cue area, and then the target pops up on the other side. Okay, that's an invalid trial where you're having to pick up your attention and move it. And so that is this invalid piece here on the left. So what's going on? When it's invalid, you have to stop and look the other direction. So that's controlled attention or endogenous attention. Remember, endogenous coming from inside me. And then lastly, we have these sort of neutral cues where it's look over here or over here. I'm not going to tell you. And then the target pops up here on the right. And so those are sort of in the middle. Since we don't know where to look, we tend to average about a middle time where we're sort of looking at both and then we might get lucky. Okay, so this whole thing is called Posner's cueing task. Cueing is such a strange word. It does have an E, or sometimes it doesn't have an E. Either way. And so in this task, you get this fixation cross here in the middle, and that just tells you where to look. So they wait until you're looking at the fixation cross before they start the trial. Then they give you a cue. So your cue might be valid. So I'm looking at this cue quickly. That's automatic attention because something popped up in my visual field. And then I've got the target in the same place. So when the target's in the same place, that's automatic attention, very fast. Sometimes, though, the target's in another place. That's controlled attention because I have to pick up my attention and move it. Sort of like a spotlight. So there's a little bit of spotlight theory where your attention sort of moves slowly like a spotlight or a lighthouse. So what happens in Posner's task is it shows you where to look. Sometimes that's valid, sometimes it's not. People are very quick to name a target if it's in a valid location, which is in the cued location. That's automatic attention or exogenous attention. We're very slow to find it if we're miscued. That's endogenous attention because it's controlled. We have to move our attention to the new place. And so really, this research led Posner to think about a model of attention that involves 3 different processes. And he was studying people with hemispheric neglect. So that is when you ignore one whole side of your visual field, but there's no good reason brain-wise why you're ignoring it. So it's there and you're seeing it, but your brain is just not processing it. And because of that research, he says that there's sort of 3 parts. There's disengaging of attention. So we're looking here and we have to sort of say, okay, stop looking there. And the movement of the attention to the new location, and then engaging attention into that area. Now, really, this is all very quick because remember, cognitive processes are kind of fast, but that disengage, move, re-engage is slow when you think about how fast we process things like words and sounds. So this is basically when you're talking to your friend and another friend butts in and starts talking, so you have to stop focusing on them and switch to the new person. Okay. And what that does for us is that we can make that moving and that engaging distinct processes, because in people with hemispheric neglect, what you find is that people either have a problem with moving the attention from one place to another, or disengaging attention from one place to another. And so people who have damage to the midbrain, okay, so palsy, have no difficulty with the engage-disengage, but the moving is really, really bad. And so we can use all of that behavioral research where we can see the reaction times and all the causal brain research from Chapter 1 to study the separate components for attention. So this is that dissociation stuff we talked about. All right, so some information processing theories. So attention is not just sort of a one-stop shop, when there are several theories. So all of these theories are just trying to explain the different pieces of attention. So we have early and late attentional selection. We've already sort of talked about spotlight theory, but we'll do a little more, and feature integration theory. And feature integration theory is actually in the next set of notes. So let's just look at early and late attention selection. And so what's going on? Let's slide here. Come on now. There we go. Is that Broadbent was sort of the father of this area, and he said that our selection process is an early stage of processing. So what does that mean? That means all this information is coming into your system and you filter it out sort of quickly. Because there's just too much coming at us at once, and we want to just process the pieces that are important. Okay, so he proposed this model that attention is a limited capacity system, and only so much information can be processed at once. So we're going to screen and pick out only the most important information to us. Now that's still dependent on your goal. So it might be your friend's voice, it might be the song on the radio. So most important is kind of dependent on the situation. Okay, so what's the difference? Early selection theory says that the filtering, occurs before the message is processed for meaning. And so meaning being like creating a mental picture of what's being said, so word processing or creating a mental image of the world. And so you're only going to get the physical properties of the system. So gender, so pitch, tone, but nothing else about what's going on in this message. A late selection theory argues that the messages are processed for meaning, so you know what's being said at the table next to you, but you're filtering it out anyway. So you still get the semantics, what's going on in the situation. Attenuation theory is a newer model that says it's sort of half and half. So after the bottleneck, so attention is sort of like a Coke bottle. Everything can't come out at once, so it's got to go through this funnel and be sort of processed piece by piece. The message is not eliminated, it's just diminished. So this is what happens when you're driving down the road and traffic gets really scary and you're like, turn down the music, I can't see. Which makes no sense, right? Well, really what you're saying is, my attention is divided, I want to focus, turn that down. And that's how attenuation theory works, is that the message is turned down. So I can still tell that my favorite song is playing, but I don't care right now, so I'm just it's just noise in the background. You'll switch to that unattended message if it's meaningful or important to you, which is pretty important here in a minute. So here's a visual demonstration. So what's going on here is we have our three different theories, and they posit where the filter is in different locations. Okay. So early selection theory says that the input, which is the bottom of the screen, which is like words or pictures, gets filtered early. And that means that you're not going to get any of the semantics. So this green area here, the semantic analysis, is what's going on. Okay, so semantics are just a meaning-based system. What's happening? So the filter in the early theory is that you don't get any semantics. In the late theory, the filter is that it's after semantics, so we know what's going on, but we don't care. Attenuation theory argues that the filter occurs before semantics unless we decide that's important. So the message doesn't go away. That's why you get this dotted line all the way up to the top. Okay. Response selection is thinking, what do I want to do? What do I want to say? This will make more sense in a minute when we talk about how people test these theories. So response selection is, my friend is talking to me, okay, they want me to say something back, what should I say? Response execution is just you actually talking or looking or doing whatever you're doing. Okay. So really the important part here is the filter. Which one is it? Okay. So how do I test that? Well, what we have people do is called a dichotic listening task, and so one of the experiments in this section is to look at what one looks like, or one of the links I have. So you're presented two messages at once, so you've got, it's like listening to two different iPods at the same time. So in one ear you get some sort of message, in another ear you get a different message, and you're asked to shadow one ear. That's just a fancy phrase for repeat what that ear is saying. So people are talking and saying, here's the message I'm hearing, and ignore the other ear. So we're looking at how they can focus their attention. So here's a really old picture of what's going on. So the person is asked to shadow this ear. So they're saying John turned blah because they're reading this message up here. And they're asked to ignore the other message, which is this list of words. Okay. So what we can do is give people a story. This is especially useful. So today, little Billy, blah, 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 bicycle, and we ask them to repeat the story back to us. And they're really good at that. But what you'll notice over here in the unattended ears, the word paper appears several times. The language changes. And so we're going to see if people notice that. Okay, so let's think about this. An early selection theory would argue that you would only get the physical characteristics of the unattended ear. So pitch, tone, but you wouldn't get any of the semantic characteristics. So you wouldn't notice that the word paper repeats, or that the it changes language. A late selection theory would argue that you would notice both of the words repeat and the language change. So that's really interesting. So we can tell if the difference between those two pretty easily. Attenuation theory is a little harder. So it would say that we only would switch ears if it was important to us. So maybe bilingual people would notice that those are Spanish words, whereas other people would just say it sounded weird. So early results in this field showed that people recall very little information from the unattended ear. Basically, they could tell you if it was a man or a woman, and that was it. So they didn't notice the change in language or the repetition in words. Okay, so that is support for early filtering theories. However, big but here, you can trick people. So what you do is you have the attended channel, you get the story here about Billy and his bicycle, and then you switch ears on the story. And so we've just basically taken those two halves and flopped them. And so what happens is that people will follow the story. Let me show you here. So people will inadvertently switch ears to follow the meaning of the story. Okay, that can't be early selection theory, because if it's early selection, we don't even hear what's going on in that other ear. It's not happening. I don't know what's going on. In late selection theory, that could work, right? Because we could just think that we're supposed to follow the story. But people would know that when they would know it switched. They would say, oh yeah, I switched ears, and then the other ear was playing paper and Spanish words. Attenuation theory would argue that they would switch ears but not hear the rest because it wasn't important. And so that's support for attenuation theory, because what happened was they switched ears because that important message switched ears, and then they didn't hear the rest. So kind of a neat experiment to be able to figure out if it's late or attenuation theory. And so you see this a lot in like everyday surroundings, because people will hear your own name. It's called the cocktail party effect when someone shouts your name. Like anytime somebody says Karen, I turn my head because it's close enough to my name, about 35% of the time. we get to working memory, we'll talk more about, that's actually a wide range of scores. So like 20% to about 80%. And what controls how often you're likely to hear your name. Okay, so more on spotlight theory and feature integration theory in the next module.